and the great gladness that we have come to be together this day. Welcome to worship. Extra brownie points are given to those who show up on Sunday. So attendance is being taken. As we enter into a service in which the questions that come from all of you will be as important as the responses that might come from me, I invite you to join in reading responsively with me, just to warm up your voices. Words written by ancestor in faith, Olympia Brown, number 569 in the day of Noah. Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it.
There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals,
which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful.
Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message.
That you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost.
Go on finding ever-new applications of these truths, and you rejoice in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God, whichever lives and loves.
It's in the spirit of pursuing those truths that it's a tradition in many Unitarian Universalist congregations to have an annual or occasional time of opening up the conversation during the sermon time to the congregation and inviting questions for the minister to respond to. Notice that I'm not going to say answer because I don't believe I probably have answers, and always the questions are far more interesting than any fixed answer might be. When I was studying for the ministry, one of the criticisms that we were always made aware of about preaching was that the problem with most preaching is that we spend our time answering the questions that people haven't asked. That's our worst fear as preachers. We spend all week preparing sermons in anticipation of the questions that might be on people's minds, but in the end, we're never sure that we've gotten it right. So we've reached the season in our church year cycle when one might say that preachers are generally a little less inspired than they were in September, and where it's also a good opportunity for us to be in deeper conversation because a year of church events and activities is behind us, and we have an opportunity for shared reflection on the meaning of all of those things. So I invite you, as the Spirit moves, to raise your hand if you have a question, and I believe Joe is going to be my assistant this morning with the microphone to help with, he'll bring a microphone to you, and we ask that you do speak with the microphone because folks can't, for accessibility purposes, so that everyone can hear what's being said. Joe, I got it. Anyone? I see Linda and Ruth.
It might be just a simple question, but I was just wondering, what do the second graders do next year? Isabel will be in second grade, and I know there's some sort of a ritual.
Oh,
Is
yes.
that an appropriate question to ask now?
Sure. You might all be aware that we are in a very heavily Catholic part of the country, or actually part of this region. And Unitarian Universalists have a program for second graders that's called Passages, in which the children learn about all of the different UU principles. And so they spend the second semester of the church year doing this. They learn about the 7 UU principles, and they actually are asked to enact, take some action in response to their understanding of a principle with each lesson. And with each one of those that they learn about, they receive a bead that goes onto a necklace. And at the culmination of it, they are presented with, they make a presentation of all of the things that they've learned, and then we present them with the necklace in worship as a symbol of their passage into a fuller understanding of the faith that they're growing up in. The reason I mentioned us being in a Catholic area is that this has become a very important tradition for this congregation, because it's also in the season when Catholic peers are all having their first communion. And so this is our answer to that, I would say, that it's a parallel process for the formation of our children in faith. So it's a very meaningful ceremony, and it happens next Sunday. So I look forward to that. And Marie Laura, can I add anything that I missed? Okay.
I was just sort of curious about what kinds of questions you were expecting or were appropriate. The first thing that sort of jumped to my mind was, is the UUA or any part of the Unitarian superstructure, so to speak, doing anything in response to the events in the Gulf Coast? And it may be too early, I don't know. I just haven't heard of anything, and I'd be interested to know if there are any efforts that are happening.
I know of people locally in New Orleans who are doing actions. I'm not aware of UUA-wide events. Our Standing on the Side of Love campaign, which is kind of the umbrella for the national or global level activism that we're doing, has been focused on response to the Arizona legislation, the immigration legislation in Arizona, and that resulted in a huge number of folks going to Phoenix for yesterday's rallies, but I'm not aware of this work happening.
Parisa, I find myself so furious over the BP oil spill that I can't even watch the news without dread and without assigning blame. I wonder if you can help us address our anger in hopes of working toward a more positive response.
Being right there with you, I've been struggling with the same question very much, because so one of the things that I've been trying to do as a practice is to imagine the folks who are the executives at BP who seem to me to be making decisions that violate every idea of decency. I try to imagine them as people that I might meet here on a Sunday morning, or that I might, run into at the market and have a conversation with. And that helps me to not try to make any gross generalizations about folks, but to say these are all people who are probably responding to pressures that they have to respond to in the best ways they can in the moment with a completely horrific situation at hand. That being said, I think the moral outrage is an important fuel for whatever solution we're going to come to in the situation. And so my hope and my prayer is that we can find ways to make voices known that this is not okay, because I think one of the things that I see happening over and over, and especially it seems with the Gulf Coast, is that what's another disaster there? It sort of feels like there's this response of, well, they're used to it, they'll make it through, and it's just heartbreaking to see this happen, and to know that it happening there is really happening to all of us all the time. It's not, we imagine that it's this isolated thing that for us in Milton, Massachusetts is really distant from us, but it's really, all of it is affecting us and the quality of all of our lives. So my hope is that we can find ways to raise a voice against it and to find creative solutions that allow us not to just sort of say those evil corporations, but to say how can we all be part of creating a different structure so that the corporations see that the public is not only interested in the greater, does it mean that there's shareholder activism in the stock trading community that says, it's more important to us that you take care of this well than that we squeeze every dollar out of our investments? Are there ways that we can begin to think bigger as a culture? And I keep thinking that each disaster is the one that has to get us to that solution. And then there keeps being something bigger. So it's a place that I really struggle as well.
Good morning, everyone. Ms. Sue Phillips. Good morning, Parisa. This afternoon, we know that this congregation is ordaining Eric Dawson. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how the act of ordination fits in a tradition that believes in the prophethood of all believers, and what you think is happening, what will happen in the moment of ordination when the congregation stands up and actually ordains Eric.
That's one of those that gives me shivers to think about it. Questions. It's a really interesting question because there is this. There are two messages that we give. That there is that any one of us is a prophet. That we are all mediators of the divine in our lives and in the world, and that we also set apart some folks for this special act called ordination, where we confer on them the honorific, the reverend, and send them forth in our name to do good work in the world. And I think the place of it is really to acknowledge that there are some among us who have made the internal commitment to make first and foremost our role as prophets and as mediators of that holiness in one another and in ourselves, an intentional practice of how we live. One doesn't need to be ordained in order to do that, but that act of ordination to me is an outward statement that practice has been witnessed and seen by a body of people who have seen that in this individual and send them forth with their blessing to continue to do that and to grow into what that means in the world, and hopefully to also bring back what is learned from that place. So what happens in that moment to me is this really magical acknowledgement of the long history of what that relationship has been and what people have seen in the person being ordained, in Eric in this case. And also this kind of power surge of all of the sacred energy that we all carry in us, with this intention that we all can live more greatly into that calling to be emissaries of the holy with one another and with the larger world. So come this afternoon, it's just going to be beautiful. We've got Matt over here also.
Parisa, one of the things I find myself struggling with is the question of how to expand my identity as a review. And it speaks to I think my growing confidence and the need to know that as a review, I'm part of a larger community, and this community that extends beyond First Parish here in Milton to the global organization, to the other review community, parishes, congregations that are out there. So I'm looking to find ways to connect in that manner, and I'm wondering what you'd recommend as ways to explore that.
I want to give this question back to Sue because she works for our Mass Bay district, but I'll do my best. I think that one of the key ways is getting involved in regional, what we call district activities. So the Greater Boston area is the Massachusetts Bay District, and those happen several times a year. There's a fall and spring gathering, and there are also all of the training gatherings that are held for lay leaders and congregations are not just an opportunity for getting the knowledge base that the training part offers, but also an opportunity for sort of cross-pollination of what some of the joys and challenges are of being in the different congregations, and they're a really nice time for fellowship and gathered faith. And there are all kinds of resources on the UUA website that are, designed to help connect. So, is there a particular kind of connection that you're?
Well, it goes back to the comment.
So the social activism?
To BP and knowing that there are so many people within the UU community and outside of it that share a desire to do something. And so whether it's, social action, addressing specific issues, political action, or as a question of organizational development, how do we bring the congregations closer to each other? I've only been to another UU service twice before, so I don't feel part of something larger.
Yeah, it's a perpetual challenge in a congregationally based structure to make meaningful connections. I believe that the UUA is doing really wonderful work right now with this Standing on the Side of Love umbrella for social activism that I'm hopeful that our congregation as a whole will get deeper involved with those efforts. I saw there was a hand in the middle of Matt also.
In my work, I see some of the worst examples of people treating other people horrifically, and I've managed to balance that by seeing miracles in my work. But when I listen to NPR, and when I listen to the news, and when I see the degradation that's going on to the earth, and people treating people and poorly and extinction of species, how do I find joy and miracles in that mess?
I have a couple different directions I want to go with answering that. I think one of the things that I think it's both important to hold the depth of despair that we feel when we see all of the bad stuff that happens in the world, and to be reminded also that that in terms of how we hear the media, that someone giving really good benefits to their employees doesn't usually make the news. Somebody, the good stuff that's happening in the world doesn't make headlines in the same way that the disasters do. And so I think that it becomes really important to make a practice of acknowledging the good that's happening, whether it's really local or in your own organization, or it could be a very personal, very immediate thing, to help to balance that. Which is not to say that we want to walk around only, with blinders on to those horrific things and looking for the bliss at all turns. But it helps to cultivate that practice so that you can greet some of it with an equanimity that lets you find a grounding. Because the world has always been full of both those propensities, and to find a place to live with an appreciation of the grace that makes any of it possible is the real challenge of spiritual living, I think. And so making sure to acknowledge those good things, however incrementally small they might seem, and knowing that those are also happening, so projecting forward or outward into larger and larger circles, where that good is happening. And imagining that makes headlines sometimes too can be a good way to balance the grief of the tragic. We've got Matt over here, Joe.
So not to beat the BP horse to death, but I've been giving some thought to this, given my undertaking recently. And while there's plenty of blame to go around of corporations and government agencies, the truth is that we are the largest energy consumers in the world, by far. And I know that our church has taken steps to reduce its carbon footprint, but I wonder what else we might do to redouble our efforts, not only to reduce the footprint of this campus, but as congregants here, what we can do in our own homes and in our own lives to reduce the demand for the products of companies like BP.
I will say that I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I mean, I have kind of, we do our home reduce, reuse, recycle stuff, and try not to turn the thermostat too high and all of those kinds of practical things that all of us know about. My concern is that it's important for us to do all of the individual home things, but there seem to be larger engines driving our economy and our consumer culture that need attention as well. So I think that general, consuming less period is a really significant piece of undoing the economy. So whether it's oil or all of the, there's nothing that we do that doesn't require the use of oil in some way. Whether it's factory, people, the trucks delivering the merchandise to the stores, no matter what it is we're buying, to heating our homes, to running our cars, and all of that stuff. So I know that there are folks here who could answer this question better, and I would welcome a response from somebody who is deep in this in their daily living. I'm looking at Richard. Is there anyone who feels like they have more to add to that?
I'll just say that regarding the fact that
I'm Laura Anderson. I've been prompted here to say that I was the founder of Sustainable Health. And in your consumption habits, everything that you buy has had to be brought here. It's brought here in trucks or on planes. They use fuel. And so buying local is the most important single thing you can do to change and have an effect on your second and third hand consumption of oil. And so when you go to the store and there's raspberries and chili or whatever, don't buy them, even if you really want them. And extend that kind of an attitude to everything that you do. Think about where everything's coming from and only consume items that are bought local.
Parisa, you've been here a few years now. I just was curious, what is your vision for First Parish going down the road from here? And how do you see your role in that vision?
Nice light question. I think that we have been in a period of internal focus in building our internal strength and capacity, as well as doing some work on the external, the spirit of welcome that we offer, being a significant internal and external challenge that's perpetual. And I really see us turning now, ready to turn in a direction that asks us who and what we want to be to the larger world, beyond being a spiritual home for those who come and find their way through our doors, but how might we have the effect? I mean, I'm hearing a theme today of, we want to be effective in some kind of action that takes these values that we share out into the world and makes meaningful progress on these issues that are really important to us and really weighing on our hearts and minds all the time. And so I really see us in the next few years taking those questions up with a renewed kind of passion and commitment. And starting locally, one of the things that's really important to me is the perplexing challenge of Milton as a whole having a reputation for being a white oasis in the midst of a lot of much more diverse communities. And I really am interested in the challenge of reaching out and building relationships across the different communities that surround us and knowing who our neighbors are and taking action with our neighbors on causes that affect all of us. So, so whether it's some of the stuff that was brought up today, the environmental issues with BP, or more personal human social issues of violence in our urban neighborhoods, which we know also happens here in Milton. Whatever the issues are, that I'd like to see us expand that idea of welcome and who is our neighbor, so that we see who our neighbors are as the folks who will be our partners in the kind of transformation we seek in the world, and we can build new and meaningful relationships. So that's so my role in that, I think, would be, as it has been, facilitating the process of those conversations and helping to build the bridges wherever they can be forged. Does that answer your question? Does that respond to your question? Jen, I think this will be our last.
Jen, and this is not a question, but a thank you to you and to the whole congregation. My husband and our kids and I have been coming this year since September, and we've really had a wonderful year. And I think this was really very eloquently spoken by our 8-year-old son, Rowan, who, when we drove by him the other day, said, "Mom," my son and daughter both say hi at church every time we drive by. And this time Rowan said, "Mom, I wish we could go to church every day. I really love it there." And it just meant so much to me. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, particularly people who have reached out to them and the RE community, and it really means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be in a community that creates that kind of wonderful world for people, and especially our children. So thanks to everyone. We all know that we hold in our hearts infinite communities of questions that beg for answers, infinite hopes and infinite fears. I pray that our commitment to one another be to carry this spirit of open, thoughtful, honest questions into our lives, so we might become ever more intentional about the answers we live into.